You almost have to continue being loud about it.
In part 3 of Black Autistic and Safe, parents and advocates shared how they empathized with Stephon Watts' family, who lobbied the state of Illinois to adopt a new law called the Community Emergency Services and Support Act, or CESA. This after police shot and killed Stephon Watts when he was having a mental health crisis in his home. Watts was only 15 years old, Black, and autistic. The new law, also called the Stephon Watts Act, prohibits police officers from responding to mental health or medical emergencies. However, in this final episode of this 4-part series, many parents like Lola Dada Ali and her husband Tosan shared how there should be a national standard.
But I think what is more important is to have as many police officers trained in just understanding that not all differences are visible. And sometimes when one is visible and one is not, and people are actually members of two traditionally oppressed groups, one can amplify the other.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support getting Americans the help that they need.
Something perhaps like what U.S. Congresswoman Katie Porter from California proposed with the Mental Health Justice Act of 2022.
My bill, the Mental Health Justice Act, funds local communities to create specialized mental health response units made up of trained health professionals. These units can be dispatched to respond to emergency calls for mental health. That way, people in crisis can get the care they need. Police officers can focus on crime, including stopping violent crime and other core law enforcement duties. And our communities get another tool to address our mental health crisis. More than 1 in 5 911 calls involve mental health or substance use crises. That amounts to millions of calls per year. To keep these Americans safe, we need to connect them to health care. It is wasteful, hurtful, and a travesty of justice to criminalize people in mental health crises rather than deliver care.
The law was passed by the House in 2022 but failed in the Senate, preventing it from becoming federal law. That means across the country, mental health response units are sparsely scattered, partially due to lack of funding. The National Council of State Legislators reports that since September 2019, at least 13 states have Medicaid-funded mobile crisis teams. In addition, training for police officers varies when it comes to interacting with those on the autism spectrum. In some departments, it's weeks. Others, it's a 15-minute video. Meanwhile, statistics show the population of those diagnosed is getting larger. About 1 in 36 children has been identified with autism spectrum disorder, according to estimates from the CDC. Autism Speaks reports that within the next decade, more than 1 million teenagers diagnosed with autism will enter adulthood.
Yeah, we had the talk, and he was heartbroken.
Dr. LaShawn Hannon is the Director of Teacher Preparation and Innovation in the Department of Urban Education at Rutgers Newark. Hannon also has an adult son on the autism spectrum who's attending college.
He was absolutely devastated that someone was not going to see him the ways that we had created this insulated bubble to love him and see him as his whole self. The idea that someone was going to judge him without him opening up his mouth, that someone was going to judge him by the way that he walks or the clothes that he wears or the way that he taps the steering wheel, right? Like that, he was visibly upset. And I had to explain to him that just like you see, hear, and experience things differently, there are other people out in the world who see, hear, and experience things differently too.
While those behaviors seem non-threatening, that can change should a situation become more stressful and tense for some autistic individuals. And sometimes stress can overwhelm that person so that they react intensely. According to the National Autism Society, when stressed or scared, people on the autism spectrum may cry, shout, or even try to escape a situation. They could also become aggressive and lash out toward others. Then there's the issue of understanding dangerous situations.
I feel like it's scarier as an adult because as a child, there's a little bit more wiggle room.
Dr. Angel Durr is a data scientist and a professor at the University of Nevada. She's also an Afro-Latina on the autism spectrum. She says for her, safety is always a precaution in all circles.
My mom was murdered, and so safety is very important to me as an autistic person because we're not good at all about knowing when we're in safe situations or not. And that's one of the scariest parts of being on the spectrum.
She says her mom was walking alone by her apartment in one of the most dangerous parts of Dallas, Texas, when she was shot and found dead in the streets in April 2021. She believes her mother's murder was a result of her mother's autism and lack of safety awareness. It's a factor in how she navigates her life today.
And even though I joke and say that it's not a death sentence, like for some of us, it's definitely a possibility because we can put ourselves into dangerous situations very easily, unknowingly, because we are naive to things. I was definitely 100% one of those people as a young person. And I'm actually grateful in that way, though, that I wasn't accepted into certain groups, because if I would have been, there's a potential that I could have gotten into a lot of dangerous situations. When I confront a situation and I feel uncomfortable now, I just run away. Like I will literally get up and leave and run off. And like people, I've been on dates with people and I feel unsafe and I will literally get up and just run off. Like, because I've learned that in those situations, it's best to just get out of the way and like leave. And there were times when I was young where people would be doing things and I would be there and I would realize like, this is not what I want to be doing, but I would feel like the pressure to like want to belong, and I would do something that I had no business doing or hang around people that I shouldn't hang around.
The Federal Office for Victims of Crime reports that if you have a disability, you're more than twice as likely to be a victim of a violent crime than those without one. In 2022, the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders reported almost 60% of autistic adults reported experiencing sexual violence or physical violence. These rates were significantly higher than those reported by non-autistic adults, which stood around 28%. Sexual harassment and domestic violence are some that are on top of the list. And strangers aren't always the perpetrators. Sometimes it's family and those considered friends. Angel Durr agrees that standard training for law enforcement is needed because it's important that victims don't become victimized by those who are supposed to protect them.
We need people that are better trained to understand the differences and distinctions, but we don't have them yet. And so it's important for us to, be around people that we trust and take the proper precautions when necessary if we are going to do certain things. So that we are safe.
It's unclear how many U.S. police departments have autism training. Back in 2020, Spectrum News reported after surveying hundreds of large police departments, 18 said they did offer training. New York City just recently announced it would expand their autism training program, a move in response to legislation by Councilwoman Mercedes Narcisse from the 46th Council District in Brooklyn. Here's what she said during a news conference with Black New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
There are more than 300,000 New Yorkers are on the autism spectrum. And the number of New Yorkers with autism spectrum disorder is on the rise. New Yorkers with autism spectrum disorder have unique needs. And at times, their behavior and mannerisms can be misinterpreted as an act of aggression or noncompliance. We must adequately train officers to increase their recognition of autistic behaviors and help avoid misinterpretation and escalation during this potentially severely traumatizing interactions. This new law will fully train our police officers on how best to approach and engage with people on the autism spectrum. This will lead to safer outcomes for all parties involved.
But details on what that training will include is still unclear. And that leaves many on the spectrum and advocates wondering when America is ready for a more in-depth national conversation about police and how they're trained to deal with the growing population of those on the autism spectrum. As the mother of a teenage son who is also on the spectrum, I share their concerns. I'm Esther Dillard on the Black Information Network.